first 20 cases were Washington, state of Washington, California with 10 cases, Illinois 3 cases, and then you've got Oregon, Massachusetts, Arizona, and Wisconsin with 1 case each. And that started around January 21. By January 31st, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services declared a public health emergency, and the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued a federal quarantine for 14 days, affecting the 195 American evacuees from Wuhan, China, and all other people who had visited China were asked to self-quarantine. By February 2nd, President Trump ordered the U.S. to deny entry into the U.S. by foreign nationals who traveled to China within the 2 preceding weeks and temporarily suspended all flights to China. United cut 24 flights, American suspended flights to LA, from LA to Shanghai, and Delta also cut some flights, but not all flights. So they were not closed, the doors weren't closed in total to China or to any place else as of February 2nd. By February 25th, the Center for Disease Control warned the US public to prepare for a local outbreak. On March 3rd, the Federal Reserve lowered the targeted interest rate down to 1.25%. The lack of testing masked the real problem, and it went below. I mean, we didn't even have 10,000 people tested as of March 10th. Go back 1 slide. Okay, there you go. All right, now we're back on the same page. On March 13th, a national emergency was declared by the FDA, and they allowed public health agencies and private companies to test for the virus and to allow anyone with a doctor's order to be tested. By the end of March, 1,000 people were tested. Mid-March, Trump started purchasing large quantities of medical equipment. And the administration used the Defense Production Act to direct industries to produce medical equipment. Federal health inspectors surveyed hospitals, reporting shortages of tests supplied and personal protective equipment. By March 16th, the White House advised against gatherings of 10 people or more and suggested social distancing. By March 18th, Trump announced the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development would suspend all kinds of foreclosures and evictions until the end of April. By March 19th, the U.S. Department of State advised U.S. citizens to avoid all international travel restrictions and placed on people who had traveled to Iran and 28 different countries, European countries. The Federal Housing Financial Association ordered federally guaranteed loan providers to grant forbearance for up to 1 year on mortgage payments for people who lost income due to the virus. Next page. Next page. March 21st, the governors of New York and California and other large states ordered most businesses to close and for people to stay inside with limited exceptions. Financial institutions, some retailers, pharmacies, hospitals, manufacturing plants, and transportation companies were all exempted. They didn't have to close their doors. But you had all the restaurants and hotels, etc., all had to be closed. And that started, now you've got to remember, at the federal level, Trump can't order that. Each state has to order their citizens to go under lockdown. So it's the governor of the state who is in charge and advising their constituents what to do and what businesses to close and what businesses not to close. Trump can, unless he makes an executive order, he doesn't really have a whole lot. He can make suggestions, and then it's up to the governors to actually decide who does what where and how the state is going to manage their people and the virus. Okay, and that's right now they have a real problem because Trump wants everybody to open up their doors, and quite a few states are saying, "No way, Jose, we're not going to come out of the lockdown." They want to maintain the lockdown. So it's a big. You see protests and everything. You've got protesters who are protesting the protesters. You've got, I mean, it's just, back in the 70s, the Vietnam War, it's all coming out again. These people are crazy. Anyway, So let's keep going. March 21, the governors of New York and California and other large states ordered most businesses closed. Okay, by March 22nd, Trump sent in the National Guard to California, New York, and Washington to set up large medical stations with thousands of beds. Chicago rented more than 1,000 empty hotel rooms to house coronavirus victims who needed to be isolated but did not require hospitalization. The part of the National Guard was the U.S. Navy ship Mercy arrived in Los Angeles on March 27th, and the U.S. Navy ship Comfort arrived in New York on March 30th. By the way, the Comfort has already left New York. It's no longer needed, and the same thing with the Mercy in Los Angeles. The hospitals are now able to deal with the cases, evidently, so they don't need the ships there anymore. Anyway, March 28th, Trump did not order a tri-state lockdown of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Instead, he issued a travel advisory, but each state, both New York State, New Jersey, and Connecticut, tried to enforce a lockdown and stopped people at the border from going into New York or, going across state lines, okay? And that is, again, something that some states locked down their borders and others didn't. So it's not something that Trump advised. In fact, he made fun of the governors who issued those type of orders. But again, those states are doing a whole lot better than the states that didn't. April 11th, the federal government approved disaster declarations for all states and territories. State and local responses to the outbreak have included prohibitions, cancellations of large-scale gatherings, restrictions on commerce and movement, closure of schools and other educational facilities. Remember, that's all done at the state level. It's not necessarily mandated at the federal level. At the federal level, he can request it, but it's the state level who has to implement it, okay? By April 20th, 4 million people were tested. Now let's go to the aid package. On March 6th, Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Appropriations Act was implemented, which provides $8.3 billion to fight the pandemic. No, you don't go to the CARES Act. Go back to another slide. Back another slide. One more. Okay, there you go. Stay right there. Okay. Over $3 billion for research and development of vaccines, $2.2 billion for the Center for Disease Control, and $950 million to support state and local health agencies. Now, when it comes to supporting state and local health agencies, that's very small money. They need a lot more money than that. On March 18th, there was another act that was passed. It's called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and it provides emergency leave and food assistance to be provided to affected employees along with free testing. And then on March 25th, the CARES Act was implemented, and this is the big tax act that was passed, providing $2 trillion to the American public and businesses, $500 billion loans to larger businesses such as airlines. And all of these loans are being provided. They do not have to start repaying these loans until 2 years after the coronavirus has ended, okay? So these are pretty good packages, actually. So $350 billion for small business loans, $250 billion for individuals, $250 billion for unemployment insurance, and $150 billion for state and municipal governments. That is much more like it. That's a much better act that was passed. So now let's look at the next one. There are still, next slide deals with other proposals by Congress not yet passed. Now these are a little bit far off in left field. I can't imagine some of these being implemented, but March 13th, Ro Khan and Tim Ryan suggested legislation which provided payments to low-income citizens in the form of an earned income tax credit. By March 18th, the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services released a stimulus proposal that the Federal Reserve would fund monthly payments, okay, monthly payments of at least $2,000 for every adult, an additional $1,000 for each child for each month of the crisis, and suspend all consumer and small business credit payments. In other words, you wouldn't have to pay off your credit cards, and you're getting money in the bank for $1,000 for each child and $2,000 for every individual adult on a monthly basis. Okay, that has not been passed. Another piece of legislation was suggested where they're sending preloaded $2,000 debit cards to every American with a $1,000 monthly payment thereafter until the economy recovers. Okay, and this is supposed to be funded with the U.S. Treasury minting $2 trillion US coins. And Mr. Rashid Talib was the one who suggested that. Bernie Sanders called for monthly basic income to help every person in the U.S., including undocumented homeless, the unbanked, and young adults excluded from the CARES Act. On April 14th, the legislation would provide $2,000 in monthly payments. Oh no, that's not for 15 years. I'm sorry, that's wrong. I'm not sure what that 15 years is all about. Oh, to 15-year-olds. It's supposed to be 16-year-olds. Sorry, to 16-year-olds and older Americans making less than $130,000 per year. And there was another piece of legislation that was suggested that would cancel rent and home mortgage payments for a year. Okay, none of those thoughts have been turned into law as of this stage yet. What the next act, the next slide, please. Okay, this is the CARES Act is the one that was passed and is probably the biggest tax act that's hit the U.S. Government in a long time. Okay, it's mainly in two areas. It's called the economic impact payments to taxpayers of $1,200, and this is not per month. This is a one-time hit, $1,200, if you qualify for individual or head of household. I mean, if you qualify for the payment. You've got individuals, head of household, and married filing joint, $2,400. All you need to get it is a social security number, and if you have, for individuals who earn less than $75,000, they will get it. If they earn between $75,000 and $99,000 per year, their $1,200 will decrease until it wipes out altogether if you're earning $99,000 a year. Now they're basing this on the earnings that you had in either 2018 or 2019. If you haven't filed your 2019 return, they're using your 2018 return to determine whether or not you're qualified to get this payment. There's, you know, if you are head of household, it means in order to file head of household, you have to be have children. So they're giving it the $1,200 will go to the household for any individual who is filing their U.S. return as head of household. And it will be phased out if they have earnings of excess of over $136,000. And then you've got married couples filing joint. They will receive their $1,200, well, $2,400 if they're married filing joint. Again, it reduces if they, after they get up to $198,000. So I've already gotten my $1,200 payment because I'm receiving a Social Security check every month. So thank you, Mr. Trump. Now, then we also have a Paycheck Protection Program providing small businesses with resources needed to maintain payroll, hire back employees who may have been laid off, and cover applicable overhead. This Small Business Administration loan is for small businesses with 500 or fewer employees. So that's pretty good, and it's kind of hard to, because the states are controlling part of these payments. They get the money from the federal government, and then it's up to the state to actually distribute the funds to the various companies. First of all, the economic impact payments to taxpayers for those of us 7 million Americans living outside the United States, we will get that $1,200, but it's not going to come in cash. is going to be a credit against our 2020 income tax return. Okay. For those with the Paycheck Protection Plan, the businesses, that doesn't help any American business owned abroad. That only helps American businesses owned in the United States. Okay. And it provides small businesses with funds to pay up to 8 weeks of payroll costs, including benefits, and funds can also be used to pay interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. And this goes for the self-employed, those people working from home. Funds are provided in the form of loans that will be fully forgiven when the payroll costs, interest on mortgage, rent, and utilities. At least 75% of the total must be used for payroll. Okay. Loan payments will be deferred for 6 months and no collateral or personal guarantees, and the forgiveness of the loan is based upon the employees maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. So you can't take the money and do with it as you please. It's all tied to payroll. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, and I think that's about it. Any questions?